presentation, The Church and Medieval Magic, Liturgy, and the Classic Grimoires, with the Reverend Deacon Bryan Garner. Bryan Garner has been an active member of the AJC for many years and a practicing occultist and grimoire traditionalist who's been involved with Western ceremonial magic since 1999. He's the author of Gateways Through Stone and Circle, a manual of evocation for the planetary intelligences. He currently lives in Colorado with his wife and son and daughter. You have a daughter, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. We need to update. I keep shuffling the bios from year to year, but it makes for easy work. Besides his occult pursuits, he enjoys the outdoor activities of Colorado, studying Celtic myths and legends, and teaching at Kashiwa Bujinkan Ninjutsu Dojo, his Japanese martial arts center. As I did a little bit of Bujinkan when I was much younger, I almost know how to pronounce that. So with that, please welcome Deacon Bryan Garner, a fan favorite across the church and the occult scene. And Bryan, I will turn it over to you.
All right, thank you. It's definitely my pleasure to share this topic with you. It's something that's very near and dear to me, and it's the kind of magical arts as such is something that got me interested and involved with more Catholic ritual and in the church that way instead of the other way around. So this is kind of a session of reverse engineering for me, but yeah, just finding a lot of people that are interested in magic, especially classical Western magic, don't seem to realize a lot of times just how involved the church was, the rituals, the customs, and how all of this became more popularized and magic as we know it today as far as the Western system is concerned. So what I have today is just a lot of slideshows. It was kind of it's the time of show and tell. It actually had to pare it down quite a bit. There's still many slides, and hopefully I can get through everything. But we'll move along from this this intro here, and basically some of the things I want to cover first and foremost is looking at magic as defined this way, and I'm going to narrow it down to what has been recently termed Solomonic magic, just to make things more specific. That's the area I work in primarily, and the things that I've published and I speak about most often is in the term of Solomonic magic, and we'll get into what that means in just a little bit. But first and foremost, when we're looking at the ancient world and moving up through the medieval period and even through the Renaissance and even further, magic is definitely something that was most notably defined and achieved through the intercession of spirits, of spiritual beings, whether they be angels or ancestors or demons or something like this. Most of the magic workings and articles, manuscripts and such that you find is about how to achieve audience and speak with spirits of various sorts, and also how to get them to do things for you, how to either learn knowledge or achieve something practical that you want, or that a client, somebody that you're working for or has asked you for something, how to get something done for them. And this is all done through spirits. So that's something to take into account. There wasn't too many concepts of things being achieved just through the will and the being of the person themselves. There's always something higher. And we'll be looking into that and how it relates to not just Catholicism, but specifically the priesthood and clergy, and the definition of magicians through that sort, which mostly they definitely were the majority of the magicians being learned people, and if not clergy, then the aristocratic or ruling classes as well. So we'll kind of move on from this, and if you guys appreciate the pictures and everything I put together. Before I go further, I did want to get some acknowledgements, and even before going into the person, I did have some help putting the PowerPoint together from a great friend that helped organize and hopefully made it look a little bit more aesthetically pleasing. So the thanks go to them, even though they wish to remain anonymous. But as far as learning, developing my own knowledge base for the magical arts, Stephen Skinner and David Rankin is definitely first and foremost. Dr. Stephen Skinner wrote the foreword to my second book, Gateways Through Light and Shadow, and has been a huge support. He is an incredible author as far as, especially of academic resources, of classical magical knowledge and manuscripts, definitely specifically in Solomonic magic as well. Right alongside that, Joseph Peterson, who, if people are not familiar but interested in magical arts, should definitely check out the Esoteric Archives online section, where you can basically look at manuscripts, classical manuscripts at magic at the click of a mouse, and it's all available. And he's had that available to people interested in these sorts of topics for many years. Aaron Leach, who earlier wrote the Secret of the Magical Grimoires, and basically making a good primer for people, including myself several years ago, of how to get into these classical arts and the meanings and such behind them. John King, a good friend and I would say a mentor of mine, and how working classical magic in a sense of integrity and appreciating the process and the actual learning and experience of these arts through replications and understandings of the actual material. And then Joseph Lasuski, who wrote Ceremonial Magic, or the Power of Ceremonial Magic, and kind of really changed a lot of the viewpoints of how people appreciated this, how we appreciate these type of magical arts now, instead of it just being kind of a psychological or an intellectual endeavor only. So moving through that, basically the way I'm going to hit this lecture today is I'm going to try to move steadily along. There's a lot of material, there's a lot of things to study, but basically I'm going to point to sources and parts, mainly in grimoires, books of magic, pointing to how they strongly relate to points in liturgy, whether it be the vestments, the process, or the ritual, or the how things are used, and just how closely those are linked, and how surprised I was when I started studying this, just how connected to Catholic liturgy specifically within the Western world, and how these were used as, and still are used as, the main processes and ritual guidelines for how magic is practiced, and might even be shocking to a lot of other practitioners, like people in Wicca and possibly other lodge style magical orders, that so much is founded on this kind of liturgical process and understanding, that we do have to give a lot of credit, because that's where the stuff comes from. But essentially, we were talking about the person of the magician before, at least one of the previous slides. And from our understanding and the records that we have, the priestly caste was the magical class, especially in Egypt, where a lot of the source material we have brief records from and such, where they were performing the spiritual and religious duties different than the priests and the ministers and Catholicism and other Christian denominations today. Their interests were more in attending to the statues and the idols, and performing the rituals for the gods themselves, and the other people, how they worshipped and when they worshipped and what they did was more of a private affair. They didn't necessarily dictate or tend to the populace that way, but they did assist the population with practical concerns, whether they were health or finding a mate, or needing financial assistance, this type of thing. And these priests would perform magical acts on behalf of these people, usually for payment. And they were a professional class system, not just providing religious services. But these are the origins of the magicians, and the standards and some of the technology, the process simply evolved regardless of the culture, religion that came into power. And you see this through Europe, into Greece, and then through the greater parts of Europe through the years as Christianity much later began to take hold and be the standard throughout the Western world. So this is what we're going to be talking about, mainly the evocation of spirits, talking to spirits in order to achieve something practical. Again, whether they be knowledge or wealth or love or this kind of thing. The source that we have primarily for Solomonic magic, and a lot of people, why King Solomon, for the image and the person that a lot of these magical texts are attributed to, and it is the Testament of Solomon. It is basically a narrative, not necessarily a magical text as of yet, but it sets the stage of the lore of how this type of magic really became concrete in the Western world, of basically summoning demons, summoning spirits that have some sort of office. They're able to achieve something, whether it's negative or positive. If you know the name of the demon, and if you know which angel rules over them and how they're controlled, then you're able to summon them if you have spiritual authority. And that's something that we'll get into in a bit as well. But through the Testament of Solomon, he makes contact with one demon through receiving a seal, and in some versions it's a ring that one of the archangels presents to them, or presents to him, and it gives him the authority to call and also bind this demon to speak truthfully, to bring other demons before him and have them reveal their name, their office, or what their job is in creation, what they can do, what kind of things they can affect, and also the angel ruling over them, so that they can basically have their office or their being set to a more positive task that's controlled by Solomon. So this is basically the groundwork. And if anybody has not read this, that is interested in this type of magic, it is foundational, and it gives a lot of background to how these things developed. But what you do see in Egypt is this technology even beforehand, calling up a more powerful god over another god, and basically sometimes threatening or binding that lesser god or that lesser spirit to perform a task through the authority of this higher being. And this is part of the technology and the process of how this particular type of magic works. The Treatise of Solomon, or the Hygromantia, as we get into grimoires, I'm not going to spend too much time, but I did want people to have kind of an idea of some of the grimoires I will be mentioning through this lecture, and also sources to go to, so that if you're interested to read and study more of how this stuff came about, this is going to be a pretty good primer for you, and also the kind of sources that I'll be drawing from, and just how much liturgical influence and Christian and Jewish Christian and very much Muslim influence came through a lot of these practices of magic as we have them in various manuscripts. So the Treatise of Solomon is a source work. I'll be talking a lot about the Key of Solomon. A lot of my quotes are from the Key of Solomon. And this is definitely the primary draws from older sources, Coptic and others, and some from the Greek Magical Papyrus. But it does talk about binding demons, calling demons through higher authority, and a lot of times viewing them in various ways, either through a crystal. There's even one through oil on a thumbnail, in a water pot, this type of thing. But you see a lot of the examples of a magician or a conjurer using a scryer, somebody that's sitting down and passively gazing into the water, the scrying medium, as the magician calls a spirit forth to view and basically to relay the messages of the spirit as it's coming through the scryer. So there's a lot of just fascinating source works, and you already start to see introductions of vestments, of very, very much kind of a combination sometimes of almost Jewish and very early Catholic vestments and vesture, the purification, the cleansing. Again, all of this having earlier sources in Egypt, religious structure, but definitely later on in Catholic liturgical practice as well. So the Key of Solomon, I would say most of the quotes, if not from the Lemegeton, or we're going to be drawing from the another grimoire that we'll be talking about here too, the Heptameron, which has very strong influences of very religious practices of the day. The prayers, there's confessions, just so many different points of where you can see just how much religious practice and magical practice really came together, at least for this type of magic. And it's found in most versions of the Key of Solomon. And when we're talking about the Keys of Solomon, there's several different versions. Most people are familiar with the Mather's versions, but I don't know what the count is at this point, but there's so many different manuscripts that the author penned a Key of Solomon, and each of them containing variations, but usually having the same basic standards for how this is practiced, as far as the purifications, the cleansing, usually the confessions, and the creation of these tools in order to summon these beings properly. So for those of you who have have this, you'll be able to go back and hopefully view these slides at your pleasure. I didn't want to read all of these out because there's a lot of information, but some of these I will be reading word for word because they really are important for the whole point of the discussion. But yes, mentioning the magical treatise and the structural use, implements, garments for the process of evocation. All right. Just a few more mentions of different grimoires I will be drawing from. The Sworn Book of Pope Honorius. This is probably arguably the most Christianized grimoire. Most of it really is focusing on just being extremely pious and dedicated, and the magic extending through that piety and that spiritual authority as a sense of really working magic, just as a very devout religious person. And in this context, supposedly attributed to one of the popes, it goes right hand in hand with the, basically the Catholic authority of the clergy and the ability to summon and talk to angels and demons and spirits in order to gain what you need. But this one, more than others, is pretty much a book of piety, a magical book of piety. And we'll be sharing some of the quotes and such from here. The book of Abramelin and the Mage, using a lot of the quotes from here as well. This is the process of gaining knowledge and conversation with your holy guardian angel. And it basically is a book of intensive religious retreat and piety. Very few people conducting this ritual, even, whether it is the French or the German versions, to the letter. It's extremely taxing. But again, the whole process of religious piety and breaking things down until you can move and have a reception of a being that is your direct link to divinity. And basically that direct link being the one process and spirit of being that has you work magic within the world. It instructs you and moves you on from there after the binding of these great demonic princes or kings, and allows you to hopefully live, with comfort and within proper union and I guess harmony with divinity and totality. And all of the way that you live and work magic in the world is all through this way. But the practice itself, from again the ritual tools, the setting up of the altar, a lot of the things, the oil of abramelin, a lot of these things coming directly from biblical sources, Old Testament a lot primarily, and basing the structure of magic and meeting your holy guardian angel through various points that are drawn specifically from the Bible. So we'll be looking at that. And I apologize to anyone. I know there's like a chat thing here. I'll keep going. I haven't looked at the chat, but I'll try to get some questions too if anybody has them this week. I don't want to miss anyone, but let me get through this Grimoire section. The Heptameron, with its basically source work of the Lucidarium, there's a lot of work that's been done in this, and very recent, I would say year to 2 years, maybe a few. There's some excellent magicians and scholars that are looking into the earlier source works of the Heptameron, but this is the one that Dr. Joseph Lasuski became famous for, of basically trying to recreate, in his version anyways, the Heptameron process of calling spirits, which is very, very much a Catholic grimoire. And we'll go over the various parts that I've shared in here, but the process specifically is very Catholic, even beyond sources like the Key of Solomon or something, which can be arguably almost Jewish, Christian and otherwise. That it shares references to both Old and New Testament. It can be a little bit more involving of both, but the Heptameron is very much a Catholic grimoire. So after we get through the grimoires, we'll be really going into the ritual implements. It's a personal favorite of mine since I make them quite often, and the working with them, but there's just obvious reference from incenses to holy water to the vestments and so on. There's pretty much things familiar that anyone who was either a Catholic, but especially who was in the clergy, would have been very familiar, and uses the same terminology. And we'll be getting into that in a bit. I mentioned the 3 books of occult philosophy, just because it is really the foundational part of Western mysticism and occult knowledge. And he basically drew from sources that he could, from what was available as well, and what he learned, Kabbalistic lore that was known, and Western Hermeticism, and basically everything coming into a conglomerate of learning that really did set the basis of Western occult mystery and knowledge. So most persons that become interested in or involved in Western Hermeticism, magic, that type of thing, are going to be familiar with the 3 books of occult philosophy. And I do mention the 4th as well, which I draw heavily from, which the Magus is actually directly taken from as well. The Magus, I do mention it has the art of drawing spirits into crystals, which I directly published on in my, especially with my 2 books of recreating the system and its functions and so on. So the Mac is definitely one that I'll draw from as well. The Lemegetin is probably it might even be more popular than the Key of Solomon, especially the Goetia. Most people that have any inkling of Western magic, they're going to be familiar with the Goetia, if not Lemegetin. So the 72 spirits with their sigils and the magical circle, so on and so forth, made more popular through Aleister Crowley. I'll be quoting from this book quite a bit. This is second to Drawing Spirits into Crystals. This is one grimoire that I worked extensively through several times and continue to do so as a means of conjuring these spirits that are listed and discovering their offices and basically there it is right there. Their aptitudes and what they can achieve for you. So I'm still new to this. I see a chat. Here we go. All right. So yes, sorry, I'm just taking a moment to see people's chats. One of these days I'll get the hang of Zoom. Okay, so moving on to the use of Catholic and Christian, let's say, ritual formula and implements of magic. And this is a favorite area of mine and something that I enjoy doing in the readiment and the process leading up to evocation, the actual working of magic to contact various spirits for practical ends. There is a lot of lore of the spirits and these demons and how they relate to us, what they are in the world. Of course, if we're coming at this in a very Gnostic sense, and things like the archons and such, it's going to have a little bit different shadings. But I'm going to be approaching this, or at least sharing this in ways as it was kind of understood throughout medieval Europe for the most part. Leading up into the Renaissance and how these magicians dealt and worked with these various spirits to get them to do various things. And there's a lot within the book of Enoch and other sources. And again, going back to the Testament of Solomon of who these spirits are and kind of how they work within the world. But yeah, we're going to go through the process of, people who actually studied and did this type of magic, not just wrote about it, and how they understood to achieve audience with these spirits. There we go. So a lot of this information I kind of stepped over myself, but just reiterating, basically the persona of the magician back in the day would have been somebody that had quote unquote spiritual authority to be able to do this in the first place. So we talk about ordination later within magical lodges and magical orders, initiation, a lot of these senses or these callings and these processes granting a sort of spiritual license to be able to do various things. And there's several references to the person of the magician being somebody of spiritual authority anyways. Most notable in grimoires like the Lemegetin and the Goetia, it refers to the magician as the exorcist. As well. So before it became more of a professional standard that was allotted to a priest to be able to perform this, the exorcist being of one of the minor holy orders, just as we have it in the AJC. It's one of those, as well as like the doorkeeper and the acolyte and the reader. but this first step is a huge one, because it's giving spiritual authority to command, to speak to something that it might be an unclean spirit, or it might be a spirit causing trouble, to be able to bind it, to make it to do something other than causing havoc. And this authority, reading starting from here, is what gives the magician his power, his authority to be able to call these beings in the first place, and have them do what he would like them to do. Um, Within all of these grimoires, I think many people that come into that, they are surprised just how much religious and disciplined fervor there is in order to prepare. And in modern days, you see most people skipping over this as something that is arcane, it's superstitious, it's out of date, and it states time and time again the type of person that is required to do these types of magical acts. And it does require an intense amount of personal discipline, being able to control those demons and impulses within the mind and the body before you can control anything outside. So, times of cleanliness, of abstinence, of removing oneself from social and habitual engagements that we usually do is always the start of this. And this is something that you see in all the major grimoires that we have. It's something that's shared between, and also for anyone that has practiced these kind of arts seriously, without simply circumventing things, will understand the reasons behind this, and that it's something that endures regardless of time. So the immersion of religious discipline. The invocations, the conjurations, you're going to see a lot of references specifically directly to Old and New Testaments, books like the Revelation, stuff later on, of being able to bind these spirits, or call them specifically through litanies from religious texts. And this is something, again, that is shared between most grimoires. So getting into favorite point, there's a big section that I hope you guys enjoy, but really looking at the implements and the things used in actual evocation, Solomonic evocation, classical Western spirit conjuration or evocation. In most grimoires that you see in the Solomonic chain, there's reference to a white linen robe, definitely being referred to as an alb. And I'm going to be showing quotes from various grimoires that shows, or sometimes specifically says or relates to a Catholic clergy vestment in that way. But there's so many things here, and I go through them all, but there's altars, there's candles, there's incense burners, the use of incense, holy metals, anointing oils, so on and so forth. All of these things being used directly in magical processes. And there's a really neat history to hear some things that I've only recently found out as well. And we'll get into it. So first and foremost, and I should put this slide ahead, I think, so the need for purification. Again, for that ability to cleanse oneself. There's a lot of discussion too among not only scholars, but more so of actual practitioners of spirits, whether they be angels or demons, having a strong sense or a strong aversion to this certain kind of odors or smells. So purification, fasting is a big thing found in most of these texts, as well as washing and bathing. Hygiene, as can be researched, was something that was on short supply many areas throughout Europe and the West through that we know it, and being able to purify yourself and be clean seems to be a huge point of having the spirits actually be there and appear and be able to tolerate being in the midst or the proximity of people. And smell is definitely a big one. And this goes in hand with the incenses as well. But beyond that, the preparation, the discipline needed to kind of remove yourself, your mind, and your will to be geared towards the operation and removed from your day-to-day thing. Pretty much every one of these grimoires is an act of initiation, if not self-initiation or initiation with other people that will be working with you. It is a time to enter in that's something different and set apart, and requires a lot of discipline. So it was, and none of these were these undertakings that can, simply just be performed in the midst of everyday life. This was something that took quite a bit of preparation in order to achieve success. And pretty much all of these grimoires state that in some fashion to another. Copious. Yeah, so the foundation, when I began sharing this and doing lectures as well as workshops, I was really breaking the act of magical process down, and without a doubt the biggest foundation of shared religious and magical process is without a doubt consecration. And I shared just a simple quote, thing that I looked up, and it says, by consecration, to make sacred or set apart, objects or specific areas are marked as sacred and therefore different from the rest of the world, bearing a special relationship with the divine. Central to the reality of consecration, or of the consecration, and inextricably linked with it is the priesthood. So this act, and within each of the grimoires, everything that is made at a specific time. It has even more specific formula for making it the correct way, but each of these are consecrated in very thorough ways, and definitely in a very religious fashion. But the ability to make a person or place or object sacred and set aside for magical use is the foundation for all magical practice. Within the world's total framework of space and time, accessible to man, there do exist specific, exceptional, and separate spaces and times distinct from the ordinary, and therefore possessing a special and unique dignity. Search of the sacred, so I really like that. What I will be sharing now is from the fourth book of Occult Philosophy. It's a little bit lengthy, but bear with me. I just cannot impress the impact of the import of how this fits into this particular kind of magic, and I think it's just stated very well within the fourth book of Occult Philosophy. So here we go. These, therefore, are the consecrations which, first of all, are necessary to be used in every kind of devotion, and ought to precede it, and without which nothing in holy rites can be duly performed. And now we come to treat of the consecrations which men ought to make upon all instruments and things necessary to be used in this art. And the virtue of this consecration must chiefly consist of in two things, to wit, and the power of the person consecrating, and by the virtue of the prayer by which the consecration is made. For in the person consecrating there is required holiness of life and power of sanctifying, both which are acquired by dignification and initiation, ordination. And that the person himself or herself should be a firm and undoubted faith, believe in the virtue, power, and efficacy hereof. Then the prayers itself by which this consecration is made is required the like of holiness, which is either solely consists in the prayer itself, as if it be by divine inspiration ordained to this purpose, just as we have in many places of the Holy Bible, or that it hereunto be instituted through the power of Holy Spirit in the ordination of the church. Otherwise, there is in the prayer of sanctimony, which is not only by itself, but by the commemoration of holy things, as a commemoration of holy scriptures, histories, works, miracles, effects, graces, promises, sacraments, and sacramental things, and the like, which things by certain similitude do seem properly or improperly to appertain to the thing consecrated. And it does go on. There is use also in the invocation of some divine names, with the conjugnation of holy seals and things of the like sort which do conduce to sanctification and expiation, such as are the sprinkling with holy water, unctions with holy oil, and odoriferous suffumigations appertaining to the holy worship. And therefore in every consecration there is chiefly used the benediction and consecration of water, oil, fire, and fumigations. So for my magicians and clergy out there who should be seeing various things in here through the elements, through especially all of us that have gone through seminary, talking about what makes a sacrament is very much referenced in here as well. Used everywhere within holy wax lights or lamps burning, for without lights no sacrament is rightly performed. There is therefore to be known and firmly observed that if any consecration to be made of things profane in which there is any pollution or defilement, then in exercising and expiation of those things ought to precede the consecration, which things being so made pure are made apt to receive the influences of divine virtues. We are also to observe that in the end of every consecration, after the prayers is rightly performed, the person consecrating ought to bless the thing consecrated by breathing out some words with divine virtue and power of the present consecration, with the commemoration of his virtue and authority, that it may be the more duly performed and with an earnest and intensive mind. So, okay. I'm gonna have to really move through there. So we'll get through this and I'll try to move on, but consecration is kind of a big one. And we'll get through here. So we're gonna go through some of the magical implements used. Perfumes perform their work. You should also have holy water from a priest, a new earthen vessel, fire, vesture, and a pentacle, and all of these things be rightly duly consecrated and prepared. I really wanted to go into holy water. Holy water is a standard. I love discovering this. Apparently in the Middle Ages, the power of holy water was considered so great that in some places fonts had locked covers to prevent the theft of holy water for unauthorized magical practices. The constitutions of the Archbishop Edmund Rich, so it's neat that we have this in the records, that the holy water had to be under lock and key because of witchcraft. So it was so commonly used in magical arts that obtaining holy water from a priest is something that you see in the Heptameron and other workings if they're not making them themselves. So holy water is kind of a basis of magical practice. And I won't read these all out, but here's some of the use of holy water, this specifically from the Key of Solomon on how to make it, and the following Psalms. A lot from the Key of Solomon. In most grimoires, there's a lot of Psalms said to finish the consecration. So we'll keep moving. There's a lot of information. This is about the making of the famous sprinkler or the aspergillum using sacred herbs with the holy water, and how that when it's used, it's able to disperse any negative entities or spirits and such things. Holy anointing oil, also used. So from the Goetia, the Goetia, and the Heptameron as well. There's anointing of holy oils on the temples and over the eyes, and the Psalm 51, which you find in most Solomonic grimoires of purging me with hyssop, and I shall be clean, thou shalt wash me, and I shall be whiter than the snow. from Albermel in the Age, the use of anointing oil of not just yourself, but with the vestments, and also with the wand and such. Just another example of where chrism holy oil is used. This talks about the fasting, entering the holy place and the ceremonies, sprinkling yourself with holy water, also using the perfume, anointing yourself. And this is from the 4th book of occult philosophy. So again, the process of making yourself holy. Going into the vestment, the main vestment. So this is part of the quotes that I was talking about. So it says specifically, let it be a priest's garment, if it can be, but if it cannot be, let it be of linen and clean. And it talks about it always with the white linen being the, definitely the alb. So the robe of the alb is the robe of the magician, historically, most definitely. Just other examples of the vestments being very, very, much the same. Again, people can go back into these and look at these. But, talking about the hat or the mitre, the crown, specifically a mitre is mentioned in the Goetia of the Lemegeton, referencing, directly liturgical vestments. And I love these images that are fun. You can get an idea of some of the things possibly worn, even though they're illustrations. There's almost deacon style stoles also that are seen, but a crown or mitre is mentioned again in the book of Abramelin and the Mage. So that's just another example where the headpiece is mentioned. I do go into the magical circle, not so much as it directly relates to, necessarily something, found in Catholic Church, but for the blessing of a place, which is exactly what I quoted earlier of making something a space sacred and set apart. And the magical circle is very much part of that, but is a huge part of most definitely classical magical evocation. So it included some pictures of, these are magical circles that I've made and then I use. The one from the Lemegeton and the Goetia, and also the one from drawing spirits into crystals. And here's another one with, after I was done with an operation of Archangel Raphael on Wednesday in the art of drawing spirits into crystals. These are some illustrations also with another classical Goetia circle drawn on the ground. But the one on the lower left here is from the Hygromantia, and it shows the magician behind a scryer who has another circle that's protecting the, it's protecting the scryer and the magician, but it's containing the spirit within the water pot as the scryer is gazing into the water pot, and then the magician's conjuring from behind. So this is a classical partnership that you see, and that's still used, that I use with magician and scryer. The one in the top center, if you notice, it's very much like a Catholic altar. You see the crucifix or the cross and the candles, but there's also other medals and the Book of Magic, and he is in a magical circle, and the incense brazier and the demon on the outside, not looking so happy that he has to deliver treasures onto the magician. But these are just examples of magical circles. The one on the lower right has the magical ring, sword, the holy oil, everything kind of contained there, and as another illustration. And it's such a huge topic, it's hard for me to to keep it all within an hour, but hopefully I'm not moving too fast or too slow. But this is another example. When the circle is rightly perfected, sprinkle the same with holy or purging water. And again, it's with the psalm being able to be cleansed within the circle. I included the earlier sources, as Dr. Skinner posted the Ouroboros, or a lot of the illustrations of the snake being arguably one of the main sources of the magical circle of protection, and where most likely a lot of this came from. And again, yeah, sprinkling it from holy water. So just, you can see the use of holy water for the use. Of course, the magician's wand. And this taken, from later from Franz Bardon, but a very famous magician with his works as well. And these are all magical ones that I personally made and have either used or sold in some fashion. Other examples of the almond wand used in Abramelin, the scepter, the one used in the Goetia, the blasting rod, the hazel one used in the Grand Grimoire, hazel wand used in Goetia, and the black ebony wand used in drawing spirits into crystals. But I bring this up specifically, and these are some other canes and just kind of wands, especially the snake, give particular attention to the snake canes and the snake wands, because we're looking at some source material that is found in liturgical practices most definitely, and biblical references, which we'll get to. This is the use of the wand in drawing spirits into crystals, that very, very Christian blessing of the defense of the circle, using the wand so that no evil spirits cross the boundary. And we'll kind of go over this, but the making of the wand having kind of an intense consecration as well, and blessing. So most of the processes that you see for the implements, there's an exorcism of basically ridding it of any impure spirit, any kind of attachments or things that may be on it, and then blessing and consecrating it and having it specified. So this is the part, especially with the Eastern Orthodox, I love, you see their bishops, cane and such, which very much has the serpents as well. And I did a little bit further research, and it's fascinating to see how this has extended. And of course, we have the biblical reference from Exodus of when Moses threw the staff on the floor and it became a serpent, most likely like a cobra or an asp or something like that. And then again lifted it up, and it was this. But this is a source material of our magical tradition through the Judaic Christian sect, but it has very much earlier sources, again, from Egypt, of the magical wand and or staff, a lot of times being that of a serpent, that the earliest magicians, when they were commanding spirits, had either a bronze or brass, and sometimes wood, implement shaped like a snake. And this is our source material for the famous magical wand. That's very much in our religious tradition as well, undoubtedly. I could probably talk quite a bit about this, but we'll keep it moving on. But it's just kind of a fascinating source. Had to give a little bit about the magical sword. And I also included this from the Heptameron, because we start going where the implements, where actual masses are being said over magical implements. There's specifically said, and you find this in the book of Honorius and other ones, that actual masses that you had to find, if you weren't a priest yourself, you had to find a very trusting kind of liberal priest that would actually take your implements and agree to do masses over them, to make them sanctified, to make them consecrated. And there's examples of this. This is the just reference to the sword, and then swords and blessings, consecrations, as you find, and various texts of Key of Solomon and other grimoires as well. But we'll try to keep things moving, because I know we're short on time. Yep. Again, so the Key of Solomon, very lengthy process for engraving and blessing, consecrating the magical sword. Pentacles, lamens, and parchments. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this because this is kind of based on the main seal, and goes into phylacteries. So phylacteries, we know some of its main direct associations that you see is like part of the Torah for the Jewish community to actually have it written out, and it's like a box that's affixed right to their head as a blessing and as a shield of defense. It serves the same way. It's to um, defend against anything, any kind of malignant influences or attacks or so on for other spirits. But yeah, I talked about this is from the Goetia, which is the pentagram. These are phylacteries, grand seals of Solomon, or the Pentacle of Solomon that I've made for these were for clients that I sold. But this is an excellent quote, really talking about how these work, so preserving us from evil chances and events, and fits a little bit to the pentacles and talismans that you find in texts like the Key of Solomon. But the difference between the phylactery and the lamen is that these are only worn by the magicians. These were worn as a seal of authority and protection for the actual person conjuring and calling these spirits into the presence to not only protect them, but give them a seal of further authority of them being rightfully in a place to conjure these spirits and demand things of them. Other examples, lots of pictures, lots of things I've either made. Here's kind of a big one, Catholic Mass. This one's talking about the sacraments and the creation of the circle from the book of Pope Honorius. But from the Heptameron, we have the pentacle or the hexagram of Solomon, and how it's actually blessed and consecrated with the Mass of the Holy Ghost, and also sprinkled with the water of baptism, not just holy water, but the water used and consecrated for the sacrament of baptism. Yeah, great question, and from Bryan, and I'll definitely this is the kind of discussion that I like and like to get to. So hopefully we can save it for the end, but I would like to definitely like to get to that. Here's a picture of the Grand Seal of Solomon through the Key of Solomon, most likely the Mather's edition, one that I made a while ago. Talking about how they're either used to sprinkle it with holy water and then through incense, and just examples again of masses where let 3 masses be sung with gospels and fumigated. So direct use of this tradition to make articles holy, to make them consecrated, to make them blessed and magical. To these people, it was the same. This is how magical things worked. It was worked through the power and understanding and the devotion to the religion, and through the way they understood it. And these things were hand in hand. A few more things. A holy table, or a table of art. Let's talk a little bit about the altar, but these were, as we understand, the altar, even in the Catholic tradition, with it's being basically a tomb, like you got a stone, and sometimes a stone, like I have a stone on top of a wooden altar. If the whole thing was an entirely stone itself, and usually contained relics and such, this was a place made sacred, everything, to have the Blessed Sacraments and to celebrate the sacraments in this way. For the magician, it was the central point of, usually if you were conversing with the spirit in a scrying astral sort of way, this is where you would have them appear, especially if they were angels. But again, this is from Abermellon, just showing how And with the feet naked, again, this is hailing back to the Old Testament, and with Moses approaching the burning bush, and a lot of references to our religious tradition about how and why things are the way they are, even in the later magical traditions. Lots and lots of stuff. These are various altars that I've made. So for the central picture, again, kind of showing that classical kind of Catholic altar table. But the wax almadel at the very bottom center is for calling angels various choras of the seasons, and they have holy names of God on them, and it's very specific that way, with incense that rises up underneath, drawing spirits into crystals, directional kings, but the archangels of the planets surrounded, and the planets and holy names and sigils on the far left for the Lemegeton of the Ars Paulina. I was having trouble remembering for a second. Just various references to the altar and how it is built. There's some reference, again, hailing back to points in the Old Testament, especially from the book of Abramelin the Mage. And for the Abramelin, this is where the implements and the oils and such things are kept. But just several examples from various grimoires. This is from Drawing Spirits into Crystals, with the scrying pedestal that definitely hails to a reliquim or a monstrance, where the sacred host was kept, and really makes me interested to see if there's any other texts or recordings of people staring into this and having visions, whether trying to look at the relic or the host, but using it as a scrying device, which is definitely where you get the device for drawing spirits into crystals. Magical rings, I just had a brief description within the lore of Solomon. Again, you heard me mention that he was given a seal, and in some of these versions, it's a magic ring given through the archangel, either Gabriel or Michael, sometimes Raziel, depending on the version of the lore that you're reading. And this again is basically a religious symbol and emblem, granting authority, but also protection against any kind of maladies of the spirits. And made just basically a little bit of lore through other magical traditions in the West, and some that's definitely seen in kind of the the other systems that we have, either the Arabic or other sources, but also how the signet ring we can see where the Pope and other of the cardinals and such will get a ring that is also established of kind of religious authority, to really make it simple. And of course they have deeper meaning and symbolism through there, but very much serve in the same way. Incense is definitely a big thing within the church, and definitely just not Catholicism, but especially ancient religions and such, Eastern and Western, a big thing and a primary component within evocation as well. And don't have to go into too much explanation, but just all the different source materials for incense and the incense burner. And of course, just like we have in our liturgy and in other Catholic liturgies, that the incense is consecrated, just like anything else used in Mass or in sacred ritual. It's usually exorcised and then it's consecrated, and through the magical process, it's usually has everything negative removed from it, and that it's designed to be used specifically for these magical acts of bringing the desired spirit to the magician. So I have a few examples of this, and just one of the, quite basic blessings from the Key of Solomon of how the incense is used, and then even how it's kept afterwards. More pictures. I like to share the pictures of things that I've made or things I have in my working space. So we've got through the implements. I kind of close this out, and appreciate everybody being with me, but a lot of the things that we can find direct reference for, but as far as the stages of Solomonic evocation, and it's really neat to see that, as Dr. Skinner calls it, a technology. It really is. It's a certain process by which these spirits arrive, and by they're kind of bound to do certain things, even in the ancient texts, and as it's transferred across various religious and cultural frameworks. These parts remain consistent, which is really amazing to see. And the consecrations and stuff, and this also includes the purifications ahead of time and everything, with the opening prayers, the invocations calling forth, the constrictical, or the constricting, or the binding of the spirits in this way, and the ordering them, the binding them to a specific task and everything. So the actual exorcism, when you're giving them the task to perform, and then finally the license to depart. All of these are found in basic Solomonic and evocation processes, regardless of the text. And there's a picture of myself and my scryer. I think right after one of the workings that we did following the second book. And I do include directly from John King his Imperial Arts Practice 1, just for a reference of the process of ceremonial evocation, and how a lot of the same dictates and disciplines are used for our religious practices, regardless if we're calling spirits or not. We're doing something magical, or we're committed to go through a certain process, perform a certain liturgy, undergo a certain ordination, some sort of important aspect of magical or religious undertaking. But that I kind of zoomed through a lot. There is a lot there. I do have a tendency to lose track of time, but it looks like I'm just a few minutes over. I hope everybody enjoyed that. I know it was kind of a whirlwind presentation of me kind of sputtering on about this, but if anybody has any questions or so on, I'm happy to discuss if we have time, but we'll leave it up to his eminence to go from here.
Okay, I'm just putting things back to the normal view so everybody can see and talking. Oh, Christina had a question, if you'll be making the slides available.
I assume if they're in the discussion, I guess, or I don't know how the recordings go, if people can use them that way. Otherwise, yeah, I'm sure I can find another way to share them with people if they want to see them.
If you've got them as a PDF, we can post them with the talk. They'll also be visible. You are visible the entire time. So I enjoy this stuff because it's fascinating, the amount of overlap, and it always gives me a little bit of humor too, to see occultists and esoterists on the internet spend most of their time crapping on Christianity or the church, and just kind of substituting some chaos magic, whatever, filling in the blanks on the names and whatnot, and kind of ignoring the context. I mean, you don't even have to go as far as to say something like the spirit of the work or Gregor. There are definitely historical and ritual contexts that should be respected. And while I'm not a purist, I'll make substitutions where needed. At the same time, if you're not going to follow the basic system, do something else.
Right. And yeah, that's my same philosophy as well. And as a personal note, it was difficult for me. It was a Protestant upbringing for me, and it wasn't bad like it was for most people, but I was having things occur and I stepped away from that. But when I got interested in this kind of things and I was reading, I really had to come to a point of like, wow, I can disregard, or maybe there's something here that I just don't understand yet because I've been, so kind of colored against it. I'm kind of in the midst of Christianity, but maybe there's something there that I could better understand in a different light. And this kind of started my journey, which eventually led me honestly to the AJC and to understand it and appreciate it even further in a different way.
Well, don't worry about the Protestant part. You were absolved in the Mass prior to your ordination.
That's awesome. That's good. And that's important.
I'm
Questions, comments? Oh, go for it.
I'm always fascinated by this intersection between ceremonial magic and liturgical practice, because it goes the other way as well, right? That when we look at the practice of the liturgy, we can look at it through the lens of ceremonial magic, and it's just the highest expression of ceremonial magic. And seeing that crossover go both ways, I think is particularly fascinating for me.
Definitely. And that's why I love so much. Of course, it's a big component in the AJC because all my brothers and sisters understand it, and they share it, and they have they have the experience and the appreciation on both sides. And for me, that's something that I personally enjoy. It's nice to learn that way.
I think one of the obscure bits from AJC history is that, if you've been around for the last 20 years, and it's too bad. I know Ben Pierce registered, but I think he's up against his schedule, so he's going to have to catch up. But one thing that Ben can tell you as readily as I can tell you is that when the AJC started, while it was, it's always, the AJC started primarily as a church for esoteric folks. It was more esoteric than it was Gnostic in the beginning, right? The focus was on giving marginalized practitioners of other traditions a place where to go. So the word magic and magician was as much in our material as the word Gnostic when we first started. And that spirit, and while we like to be an esoteric church that you can also take your grandma to, and that has in fact happened. People have taken their grandmas to AJC. There's still that undercurrent and that openness for people to practice and explore other traditions, but also to have the community in the framework of the AJC. So yeah, we're all about it.
Historically, we always like to remind people that the friary actually predated the church.
That's right.
That the friary, there has always been for the AJC sort of an esoteric engine, sort of looming in the background.
Brian
Bryan
raised his hand.
Bryan, since you've been ordained a deacon, have you noticed any difference in your magical practice?
Great question. Definitely, I think so. If any regard, it's just moved incrementally higher, and I think it's coincided with a lot of things that have occurred in my life as kind of a pathway. And it seems like magic, seminary, and the efforts put towards both have really amounted to the experience, and then now the amount of work that I do in each, and it's phenomenal. I always wonder how much these beings and such that I come in contact with, how much that's recognized as before the ordination, it's very curious how much they recognize that as being a substantial, part of how. I always wonder how they view myself or the magician, and deal with things that way. But regardless, my own practice and how I feel when I'm stepping into the robes and the vestments and doing that, I guess if anything, it feels even more appropriate in a way that I'm stepping in, beyond kind of rehearsing or dress up to that way, that it becomes even more of a sacred act even before. And I didn't even know that was a possible thing. So yes, there's definitely, but it's still, nebulous on some fronts to exactly what degree.
Mm-hmm. I was initiated into the friary before I was ordained a deacon or a priest. And I noticed that my practice before, and I have journals about this, my practice before I was ordained and my practice after were completely different. Because before, if I was summoning a spirit or talking to a spirit, I had to test it and test it hard to make sure that I had the right one and that I wasn't being deceived. Afterwards, it was very clear. And, after being a deacon, it was clear who I was talking to. And after I was a priest, it was who I intended to talk to every time. I still have a little people kind of poking at the edges that aren't necessarily the ones that I want to involve, but they're very apparent. And it's a very interesting thing that the need for, some of these implements has kind of gone down a bit, because the implements are kind of carried with me as being a priest. And as a priest after the order of Melchizedek, and as an anointed with the power to bind and loose, it kind of changes the game.
I think there's something definitely to that, and it's apparent even in the text we have in the grimoires of these people. If they weren't priests, they had to get something blessed by a priest, or a priest to say mass over them, or have some sort of extension. So yeah, it only makes sense that if you're actually in that position of authority and everything, the consecration of the vestments and the implements and stuff are already with you, already there. So I mean, yeah, that goes hand in hand for sure.
Exactly. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
I was going to say, Christian made a comment in the thing saying, reminds me of the old dress for the job you want, not the job you have. And funny you should mention that, because correct me if I'm wrong, Deacon, because you're the expert in this thing, but essentially what the magician is doing in Solomonic magic is, a sort of very fancy version of fake it till you make it, basically fooling the spirits that they're King Solomon. That's why they're standing in King Solomon's stead. That's why they wear the crown and the vestments. And the mitre is that they're being taken for King Solomon. So there is an element there, in holy orders that kind of supplants that. And I know that also, at least in the texts with which I'm familiar, because I'm a Martinist, and Martinism covers a little bit of the Heptameron. There are some texts and some ceremonial stuff that basically say, if you're a priest, you can skip these instructions. There are certain things that you have to. I think it's the girdle of Moses, which we laugh about in our Martinist lodge, because it drives me nuts that it's called a girdle when it's more like a stole. And essentially what it's doing is it essentially gives the layman, the non-ordained magician, the equivalent of a priestly stole. And so there are lots of things where, essentially the ceremonial magic tradition, the grimoire tradition, in that regard, is basically juicing up the magician for kind of individual acts as a priest, as opposed to something that's kind of standing or pre-existing for somebody who's ordained. So there's lots of crossover.
Yeah, definitely. It's a point of discussion too with the vestments, and how, like in the Key of Solomon, it talks about making a crown, but it's out of parchment. It's like paper, even though it's from the animal, and it has holy names, and there's some discussion of like, well, is the spirit fooled into thinking that really looks like a crown and everything else? And from the experience and from my sense of these things is that it's not so much them really even caring about the physical representation or even how something looks like we might appreciate it, but there's something energetically there. We write these holy names in the magical circle, but is there meaning behind that? Is there actual power? They're just representations of things. Where does the true power and authority lie if they're consecrated and they're blessed? Is it the thing, or is it the power behind the thing, the representation? And this gets into some of the debates with my colleagues this way about where those things are, and that when those consecrations and those understandings or go through ordination and they're present with the person who's standing before the Spirit. I think that's a major thing of when this stuff works or doesn't work when people attempt these kind of things.
Just a quick note, we are at our time point to jump into the next talk so that we can give folks time to settle, prepare, and check audio. But yeah, that was a really good talk. We're going to have to go further in the exploration. I mean, for me, I just like looking at all the kit because you've amassed quite the collection, and you're pretty good at making it. I really dug the Seal of Solomon ring with the stone in the middle. Kind of works. Yeah, thank you for doing that. That was an excellent talk. And I've listened to obviously we've talked in person, and I've also listened to many podcasts with you covering different aspects of the thing. But it's nice to kind of see it laid out front to back from your end. Particularly with relation to the church, because we're all here in the church context. So yeah, thank you kindly, and folks, I will see you in under a minute in the next room.
Thank you. It was my pleasure. Love sharing with everybody.